I'm convinced Iron Jugulis was only made for fan service, and maybe because a dev at Game Freak didn't want their Hydreigon body pillow to be lonely anymore, because competitively, this Pokemon makes absolutely no sense. So we compare it to Hydreigon, and it's pretty much the same thing, except 10 more base speed, but we lose 3 special attack, which means nothing for damage calculations. It's slightly more frail, but again, to a degree where it doesn't really matter. And then, like, the stats were stripped from attack because it doesn't have the same base stats, because it doesn't have pseudo-legendary. It's really just a mess. But it gets even messier the more you look at it, because we're Dark Flying at the cost of Levitate. So, like, we keep that ground immunity, but then we lose Dragon, and Dragon is actually super duper really good in Generation 9 because there's a lot of unaware Pokemon, and Draco Meteor is actually a countery thing into unaware because you use Draco Meteor, you're -2, and the opponent is unaware, so your Draco Meteor does full damage. It has like this weird interaction, and with Pokemon like Dondozo, with Pokemon like Clodsire, as well as Skeledirge being very common threats, you actually just want to stab Draco Meteor them until they go away. So that's going to be better on the Hydreigon. Also, a weird thing about the Generation 9 metagame is that it's a lot of bulky attackers. Even Paradox Pokemon haven't fixed that problem with like their crazy special attacks and sweeping stats and stuff. So this 108 versus 98, you really don't feel it. And then because you're losing like this ace move of Draco Meteor, you're also losing out on a lot of damage calculations, and then your move set is whatever. So it's like, yeah, you go max special attack, max speed, and then I don't know the plan. Like, do you go timid so that way you outspeed 105s, even though those matchups don't really exist? There's not even like 100 speed tier interactions that really matter. Okay, so then you go modest nature, and really the only benefit here is that you can run the booster energy. But then you're still losing, like, the Stab, Draco Meteor, Super Ace move. I guess you go, like, Terra Dragon. But now you're also a 122 special attacking Pokemon. Even at the +1, doesn't get super threatening with, like, a base Stab Dark Pulse that isn't getting Terra boosted into 2x. So, yeah, like, you're just this. And 108, 122 has kind of gotten power crept, and your coverage isn't that crazy. Like, you have the Air Slash for the stab, and that's kind of nice on the chance to flinch, but I don't think it matters, because Dark Pulse already has chance flinch. It's less, but it's more damage. Air Slash can just miss, but the problem is, because Flutter Mane and Screamtail and other Fairy-type Pokemon are very common and very threatening, then you need to actually have Flamethrower because a lot of Scizor is getting played, so you actually have something to do into the Scizor, and with the Booster Energy, at least you get to change up your moves. But if your Iron Jugulis gets switched out, or like has to switch because it's in a bad matchup, then you just lose the Booster Energy boost, and now you have a no-item this with, you know, coverage. It's like, it's good coverage, but it doesn't swing anything in this crazy kind of metagame. And like, yeah, you can deal with Fairy types a little better, and you have this, but it's just Hydreigon. And then, like, it's the same kind of ideas that you want to get into with the Hydreigon. Your coverage is a little different. So, Rock, Electric, Ice, Fairy weakness on the Iron Jugulis, and then we have more weaknesses, as well as the devastating 4x Fairy weakness for the Hydreigon, but you kind of play around that. Now, I don't consider Hydreigon to be a good Pokemon. It's actually cratered in usage for Generation 9, but the same thing has happened with the Paradox form, in that it's barely getting played at all. So, like, the more you kind of look into this, like, it's just a special attacker. If you like Techno Hydreigon because it looks cool, you run it. If you don't get any extra options, you can't do anything cute. And that's another problem with Paradox Pokemon, is that they have, like, the stats and they have, like, these crazy gimmicks, but they're outrageously one-dimensional. I was kind of seeing, like, what kind of upside we had. So, Modest Nature, Choice Scarf, because you really can't manipulate the stats into, like, Booster Energy. Like, you go Timid, and then you can Booster Energy for the effective Scarf, but you need that Modest for the stats, and now you just have too many points and speeds where it doesn't matter. So, weird thing is, you can go Modest, max hit points, max special attack, like no speed investment, or just the extra point of tech because creeps and stuff and weirdness like that. And then Choice Scarf on that makes you outspeed Iron Bundle, so it catches that 136. it really just catches every Pokemon that isn't speed boosting, and again, the meta game and speed tiers are super weird to where it's really about sub 90 speed tiers and speed creep interactions, and then like +1 120 plus, or like 110 plus weirdness that then gets really sketchy. But in between, it's like, yeah, I guess you can do this, but now you're Scarf locked on a 122 special attack Pokemon, which isn't that great, and then you're just not boosting that, and at least you have the Modest to get some extra damage. You can bulk into it, so like 94, 86, 80. At least you don't just get super wiped out by super effective moves, and maybe you survive a little longer in certain matchups. So that's a nice thing. And then we can look at a Pokemon that just has no special stats whatsoever. So 56 hit points, 60 on the special defense, and then Dark Pulse is still not a KO on just Modest, but you go Terra Dark, and that's what I was talking about earlier with like trying to leech out that extra damage. We're going like Terra Dragon, Draco Meteor doesn't feel as good as like having Terra Dark, Bread and Butter, and then also since you're outspeeding just a lot of base sweepers that are Specs or Focus Sash or something, and generally can survive them if they're not super effective, chance to flinch, also nice, find some KOs, pick it up, but then you're just running a slightly faster Hydreigon, where in this meta, slightly faster Hydreigon is still just Hydreigon. Now, I'm not really trying to look at this matchup from the other side of where, like, Iron Bundle hits you and what super effective hits you survive. So you can't survive Specs, 124, Stab, even a low base power move like the Freeze Dry. But if it's a Focus Sash, numbers get kind of weird, but that's also like the Terra Dark, kind of removing a weakness. Dark is just a really good monotype as well. So you can actually cut down and then, like, debate and maybe win something out like that. And it's really just, okay, I'm a 2-hit KO, but since I'm faster with that Scarf, I 2-hit KO you better, and then I'm just a 1+ Pokemon. There's a million of those, and you effectively just have the same thing possible with the Hydreigon, and we can see that in the usage stats. So now that Pokemon Home is updated, it's really nice to show off. I don't want to use it as a crutch, just be like, hey, just go to Pokemon Home and build your moveset off the most used things. One, just going off of raw usage statistics is really bad, which is why Smogon is such a trash format and just has, like, the worst players coming from it because it doesn't do anything to develop game sense. But at least you can kind of see what's being played and then play around it. And even then, it's very common for, like, flavor of the month stuff that actually just isn't that good or easy to counter or easy to play around. Just kind of, like, floating up to the top, especially with rental teams and all the hacked Pokemon and stuff. So yeah, it doesn't really develop anything, but you can just kind of, like, see how this kind of interacts. So Hydreigon being 25th most used doesn't feel correct for, like, just kind of seeing its presence throughout the last decade of Pokemon effectively, and then Iron Jugulis being 72 shows there is a problem with Pokemon if it's underperforming or underpicked compared to Hydreigon. Then you look at the movesets, it's like, yeah, you got Dark Pulse, Air Slash, talked about like the hindrances of Air Slash. So then if you go into the booster energy, it's like having a Life Orb that doesn't burn you, but that damage kind of doesn't even matter anyways. So it's like, yeah, I guess it's like having 2 Life Orb Pokemon on your team because you can run that into Paradox in some kind of way, and it frees up the taunt compared to a Choice Hydreigon. And as we can see, Choice Hydreigon is going to be about 50% of the Hydreigon out there. So it's like, it has slightly something, but it isn't enough to matter. And then like Flash Cannon, that's good for Fairy-type Pokemon, so it's like Dark Pulse, Earth Power, Flash Cannon, Taunt is an option, but like I said, like you're finding more need for those flamethrowers, for those matchups, especially into something like an Amoonguss if that Pokemon pops back up. Because Scizor is becoming a very prevalent Pokemon, especially Choice Band, so if that threatens a lot of Pokemon on your team, you can just throw out the Flamethrower, have Iron Jugulis tank it with its, pseudo-ish legendary stats, and then that's the thing. Sub has that niche anti-tank usage, and even then, like, Hydreigon also kind of shows to be a mess. We got Specs most of the time, Choice Scarf, Leftovers, and then, like, Weird Life Orb, and then Focus Sash has popped up. I don't even respect the Assault Vest, even though, like, we saw Assault Vest on Fluttermane 2.5% of the time. I respect it more on the Fluttermane. That's some madness right there. And then the moveset on Hydreigon also kind of showing the same stuff, to where it rarely throws out the taunt. It can sub Nasty Plot and then, like, try to take over the game with Dark Pulse because it hits everything. Fire Blast, Flamethrower kind of picking up more usage because it's more commonly running into the Scizor matchups. I think Fire Blast is overkill. Maybe that's for the Amoonguss, where like Specs Fire Blast wins that. Some other Pokemon interactions, like I've been Fire Blasted by a Hydreigon, and I didn't like it, but then it can miss, and it's still not super common. So you can see like the bread and butter for Hydreigon is Dark Pulse, Flash Cannon, Draco Meteor. Then it kind of opens up an option. I think U-Turn's trash, though. And then, like, yeah, it just kind of plays into Specs and Scarf, which is kind of why I led the video mostly pondering on those interactions to where it's like, how do you run the Scarf? How do you get more efficiency out of this Pokemon? Is it even worth it? And then if you're going to go wall breaking with this and you actually run the choice spec so you get more damage than the booster energy, you're just Hydreigon, but not winning those Draco Meteor one-shots. Because, like, you can just use Draco Meteor to KO the opponent's last Pokemon, and then the -2 doesn't matter. Or if they have the unaware Pokemon, you just go, I'm bringing Hydreigon. They don't get to set up on me. They don't get to kind of, like, anti anything I'm going for. And as we can see from the usage statistics, Choice Scarf Hydreigon isn't really being that successful because that's not what, like, you're not bringing a sweeper in the 100-ish speed tier to then sack damage on 125 of an offensive stat to counter out something like the Iron Bundle or the Flutter Mane. It just doesn't work that way. And also another big problem with the Paradox Pokemon in general is that if they use the booster energy, not only is it a one-time use, but it effectively just telegraphs the moveset of the Pokemon. So it weakens a lot of the surprise factor as well, where it's like, oh, Iron Bundle just showed that it's, you know, using its booster energy for speed. Most likely going to be an offensive set instead of like the weird leftovers Encore filth that's out there. And it also shows the moveset by not immediately showing a booster energy. Now, some Pokemon get away with that where it's like, oh, Flutter Mane can still be Specs or Focus Sash and still be a sweeping Pokemon, but Iron Jugulis not showing, it's like, well, okay, I know it's going to be most likely Specs or most likely Choice Scarf. There isn't any, like, it just has these weird interactions, and kind of like I said, the Pokemon doesn't really seem to exist for competitive, which is weird, and then it just was all about the theme, and they didn't even, like, try to slap some nonsense into it that, like, made it break the game. And in one aspect, you can respect the balance. Like, yeah, compared to Hydreigon, which has been prevalent, but not overwhelming in pretty much every Pokemon metagame, it's actually, like, a well-balanced Pokemon. But as we've talked about, if a Pokemon is balanced, that means it's actually underpowered. So if you make another balanced Pokemon, just like an underpowered Pokemon that gets crept out by everything, or loses out to options compared to other Pokemon in the same bracket, like Paradox, or same generation, or same archetype, and stuff like that. So, yeah, you don't see it, you can use it, but it just is outclassed in many different ways by many different Pokemon. So, that's the breakdown. Hope you all have a nice day. Thank you very much for watching.